In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. They promise it'll get better, but it usually gets worse. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data, so we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, and other industry scandals are designed to keep the money flowing. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing, so they do a virus scan and then wipe out our precious photos. Intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Mark Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my home office, overlooking the hills of Western New York, it's the Computer Exorcist Podcast. Thanks for joining us for another episode. That means you're sticking around for some reason. My name is Mark Anthony Arena. I am the Computer Exorcist. Special guest interview today. We have Riley Cagle, and he's going to explain to us what he does. Quick couple of shout-outs before we talk to him. I want to say happy birthday to listener Matt. Thanks so much for always being there and supplying good 90% of my articles that I discuss. I want to celebrate, thank you all again. We hit another milestone, 1,700 downloads. So that's so great. I noticed that this morning as I logged in here to my red circle. Also, review us on whatever podcast directory you might use. For example, Apple Podcast Directory or Podmatch or Podbean or whatever you listen to me on. One of my clients said she left me a review, so I said, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I'll ask the listeners for that. So please do that if you have some time, and that's greatly appreciated. You can go to my website, thecomputerexorcist.com, my newly remodeled website, by the way. Check it out. I spent a lot of hard work on that, spent a lot of months auditioning some site builder tools, and a lot of frustration, but eventually I found a really good site builder tool, and the site is just perfect. It's as close to perfect as you could come. It's the contrast was just so ridiculous between these horrible, infuriating tools and this one good one that I found. It's kind of a good thing. I like it that way. I'd rather have that than a lukewarm tool, right? I think it was Jesus who said you could be hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth, right? So I think there was one lukewarm tool, and that was the one where it was like it almost gave me what I wanted, so I kept spending time with it, and it almost gave me what I wanted, but it's like, oh no, that's not, no. And I wasted more and more time with it because it was so lukewarm, right? So I'm kind of glad that the other 11 were so horrible, but eventually I think it was like the 12th or 13th one or whatever, it was just phenomenal, and everything they did was logical and beautiful. So thecomputerexorcist.com, check it out. It's the first major refresh I've done since 2016, and it's just so beautiful and so clean and so modern and just so spot on, simple, logical. It's readable, right? We read with our subconscious nowadays. We just flip through pages and flip through things, and we're not actually paying attention. So I make it little blocks, right? It's very easy to read little blocks. So Riley Cagle, welcome to the show. Tell us about you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I just want to start by saying that all my opinions are my own on this show and not reflective of my employer. And so everything that I say here is based off of personal experience and, my professional experience in the industry as I've lived it. And but thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. I totally get that. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So my name's Riley. I am a registered federal lobbyist for worker health and safety in Washington, D.C. And I've been here about 3 years, and I've done just about everything there is to do down here. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I've worked for the House of Representatives. I've worked in campaigns. I've worked for both national and local. And I've also done a lot of different trade association work as well, and legislative analysis and monitoring. And so I am just, I've always been in politics my whole life. And now currently I sit as a registered federal lobbyist.
That's so cool. So you worked for representatives, and now you're working outside of government per se, but as a lobbyist, so near them.
Yeah. I did 3. So to say, I always say, like, I worked on the Hill, and I did. I was paid, but I was a paid intern, but I did so much like there that a lot of people didn't get to do. A lot of interns don't get to do, and we'll kind of dive into that, I guess, here a lot. But there's just so many things to talk about in that's really, really cool.
That's great. And if so. The reason why, I mean, we just became friends recently, and I said, I got to get this guy on. He's so fascinating. But what I try to do with my show, like every other tech talk show, right? It's, some printer came out, and you should throw away your old printer in the garbage and buy this new printer because it has more buttons on it. And these tech talk shows are so linear and so one-dimensional. And I try to do the opposite on my show, where I have all sorts of guests on who are all sorts of fields, and I try to relate what I'm doing to what they're doing, right? And be that well-rounded person that my dad told me I should be in high school. He said, because I was a computer nerd, he said, you got to be more well-rounded. So I pride myself on finding interesting people. And as you all know, if you've listened before, we do a lot of articles, so I try to find articles that are related to what my guest does and try to get their unique opinion on it, because, hey, guess what, folks? This isn't a hobby anymore. Technology has a huge impact on society, and that's what we're here to discuss and expose.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So Riley, when we were talking the other day, you had something really cool to say. I was grumbling about the government or saying something about it, and you really gave me a nice insider perspective on what happens inside the office of one of our representatives in the United States government. Tell us what happens in the office.
Yeah, and if you did happen to be grumbling about the United States government, and particularly the legislative body of Congress, and the elected officials, I mean, everybody, you're not alone. I mean, a lot of people do. But I think it's probably best to talk about how is a congressional office structured first. So when you talk about like your local congressman in the House of Representatives, their office staff usually ranges about anywhere between like 8 and 12 people. Depends on how it's set up. And then when you talk about your U.S. senator, that depends. That size varies from 30 staffers to upwards of 60 staffers in one office. And they all operate like small businesses in the Capitol. They're all different. They all have different office policies. And they all run their businesses drastically different based off staffing.
That's really cool. I like that they're all small independent businesses. I remember you said that now.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. Like some offices, like, so the Capitol itself, and I like to use this example, like the Capitol itself allows like dogs in general, right? But like certain congressional offices like don't allow pets in in their specific office in the Capitol, but other offices, like, you have people that bring their dogs in like every day. So it goes down to like those small policies. They're all different in there.
And they all have different vendors for their technology and different.
Yeah.
that sort of
Well,
thing.
yeah, well, sort of, yeah. There's three big, and we'll get into, sort of the constituent part of it, like the constituents, what happens to the mail that you write in, the calls that you call in, and the emails that you send. They all have, it's really between three different vendors there for what they call constituent relations management technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Constituent
that's
Relations Management technology. Good way to put it.
Yeah, it's really really good stuff actually. It's really cool stuff. The three of them, the three big ones are called Fireside, Indigov, and IQ. And those people, like their whole business is just selling that technology to the legislative branch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's
Um,
like not a it's like an oligopoly basically.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it is a very highly specialized and a very small market.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extremely small market, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
selling to 535 offices on Capitol Hill, and that's your market.
And
That's it.
that's absolutely limited.
Um,
But I still love that you have more than one or more than two, or you have three choices,
yeah,
right? I because most small business industries, right, bug exterminators, mechanics, whatever it may be, most of them are actually beholden to one tyrant. I remember I was in someone's office once, and it was a modern machine I was setting up, but the software they were using was from this monopoly guy, and he's one guy.
yeah,
And
yeah,
of course, the whole industry had to use him, and it was an ancient Windows 3.1 program that he kept slapping duct tape on every time Microsoft unleashed another version of
yeah,
Windows on humanity. And I called him for help with his obscure product, and he was just a guy in a basement in Alaska. And he goes, "All right,
yeah,
are
yeah,
you done now? Can I go now?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, great! You don't even have a customer support person; it's just you." So
uh-huh.
at least you have three. I say this all the time on the show. At least there's some kind of a choice, please.
Yeah, and it's so like what offices use, it's actually very fluid. So like one year, like Fireside will have like sort of a down year, and something happens maybe in a couple offices, like a technical issue or something like that, and that can actually shift the tide. And then a lot of offices, I know the last time I was there, like a lot of offices were shifting over to Indigov because Indigov just came in and cleaned house and
Hmm.
gave a really good sales pitch. And you know what? A year or two from now, it'll all be Fireside. And remember that you constantly have members of Congress that are rotating in and out, like new ones going in and old ones going out. So they don't just inherit the contract that the old
Mm.
representative had.
So they have
They
to
have
make a new
to
one.
negotiate a new contract with a new company, like a constituent relations company,
That's really
um,
good. Keeps
to
them on their
provide that
toes.
software.
Like everything I talk about in this industry is human motivation or the lack thereof.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's
they're constantly, and they're constantly like changing their prices, and like they're constantly competing with each other. It's actually a really competitive business.
good because most of the cloud stuff isn't, right? And I always say on this show, if you have a Samsung phone or an Apple phone or whatever, even if they're not a monopoly with 100% of the market, since they've locked you in enough with all the billions
Yeah,
of little features that they're trying to get you addicted to, they feel as though they can treat you like a monopoly.
yeah, yeah, and all this management software, like all it is it's a, and I actually don't know what the acronym stands for. Maybe you could help me out, but I know it as, it's just a CRM.
Yeah, customer
Um,
relations management.
no, no, well, I don't think it actually stands for that though. I thought it stood for something else. Like people use CRMs in like business and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, customer relations
yeah,
management. Okay, yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense. I now look a little bit dumber.
No, 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 no. There's so many acronyms flying around,
Yeah,
and they change them every
no, I
day.
know. But yeah, it's fascinating technology, and I do want to stress to the audience, like this technology isn't a it's not like an automation thing. It's just a way to organize the vast amount of correspondence that each congressional office gets.
That's really cool. Yeah, tell me how many letters they get every day.
Yeah, so I have friends on the Hill that work in the Senate, and the Senate's fascinating in terms of how much mail they get. I mean, you think about it, there's only two representatives for each state, right, in the Senate. And you have certain offices, and it obviously depends on like the name brand of the senator, how famous they are. Like if you're talking about somebody like Bernie Sanders, that's a really famous person. They're going to get a lot more mail from both in-state and out of state.
Interesting.
But one of the numbers that came across one year for one of the Senate offices that I know, they received 1.7 million phone calls, emails, and letters in one singular year.
In 1 year.
Yeah. In 1 year, 1.7 million communications from constituents, from non-constituents, and all of that. These offices range between 30 and 60 staffers, depending on the size of the state for the Senate, at least.
Wow.
So you have, a lot of times it's like interns are the front line of handling constituent relations.
So they're not just out there getting coffee.
When they call in, you're the person that they talk to. Really? And so they receive so much that a lot of times the interns are the ones that are organizing a lot of this for a separate team of people. And they're called legislative correspondents. And they are actual staffers. And they take all this communication, they kind of distill down each communication into batches. So based on like which issue is being talked about in the letter or the phone call.
Okay, because a lot of them, and same thing, I got almost that many number of calls myself last year, and certainly I categorize everything as the same 20 questions, right? So I have a frequently asked questions list, same idea, right? Oh, okay, you're calling about your Wi-Fi. All right, here's your answer. And I have the same 3 sentences I tell each person. Yeah.
Right. And by explaining this process, it does seem by nature a little disingenuous. Like it may seem like you're not getting like your representative's response from it. Like you may say to yourself like, oh, I'm just getting a letter from some paid staffer, not the actual like congressperson.
And it's a canned answer. But I totally get that only because I've been on your side of the desk before. I get it where, look, you know what? I'll start out with a canned answer, but then I'll certainly talk to the person and customize it and whatever, right?
Yeah, well, and I do want to stress out of that the legislative correspondent's job is to draft up like a letter or an email response. Usually the letter and the email are the same thing, just different formats. But each of those responses on issues such as like gun control, right? It's a very popular issue after every single mass shooting in America. Congress gets flooded with calls about like gun safety and the Second Amendment. And so a legislative correspondent will draft that letter for the congressman or congresswoman. And then they actually do present that letter, and it is read by the elected official. And they do actually sign off on it. They say, yes, this is my stance on this. This is what I would say on it. So the legislative correspondent's job is to write in the voice of the person that they work for. So, and get that down. And it is reviewed by the member.
That's actually really reassuring, knowing, okay, look, that's fine. I totally get it if an intern wants to prepare your letter, but the fact that you have to read it and sign off on it, that means a lot.
Yeah, it does. It brings a lot more. I mean, the process is still genuine. It's just, it is impossible for a federal elected official at this point. It's literally impossible for a federal elected official to respond personally to
sure.
every
so 1.7 million
communications
a year. That's,
You wouldn't be able to do your actual elected job.
I'm actually surprised that they're able to respond at all. A lot of times you just assume, right? You send a letter to some company or whatever, and they're just not going to respond at all. That's cool. It's kind of like the USPS, how they do the write a letter to Santa Claus every December. Like they have to respond to every kid,
Yeah, and some offices, not all offices. Again, they are all small businesses. They run differently, but some offices, they actually keep certain people that call in about an issue. They'll select 20, 30 people a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. And not every office does this, but they'll actually put it in a binder for the congressperson, and they'll give it to them, and the congressperson will sometimes actually call those people back and answer their questions directly to them.
If it's really
that's
special.
a lot more common in the House of Representatives, where they receive somewhere like 100,000 communications, or anywhere between like 50 and 100,000. Again, it depends on the office. Some offices receive like 20,000 a year, but for those offices, a lot easier to pull 30 people and say, hey, here's 30 people that asked these questions, and if you could give them a call back and answer the questions themselves, answer their questions yourself, that would be awesome. And I actually worked for an office that did that.
That's so nice. And you know what? I'm thinking in my own office, right? I have a little shelf in my office, and if a client mails me a check and puts a little thank you card in there, sure, I'll plop the thank you card on my shelf for a while.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, and we definitely those people that get calls back, directly from the congressman. It's not just people that agree with the congressman. It's not just people. We don't cherry pick those responses. We give deference to people that are respectful, kind, nice, and even if they disagree, if they call us and they say, hey, I really disagree with the congressman on this issue, but I would really like for you to share my opinion with him. And they're very respectful.
That's so nice. We need that. We totally need that, because there are plenty of times when I'm like, oh, I'm mad about an issue, but even if I ever did write them a letter, I would be respectful about it, because of course they're not going to listen if I'm mad.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, man, being an intern on the Hill, you are the front line. Like I said, you receive all the phone calls. You take all the phone calls. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that I can say this with great confidence, I have genuinely seen the darkest side of humanity taking those phone calls. There are people out there that they just kind of, they're nameless and they're faceless, and they call in, and all that shows up is their phone number, and they just kind of think they can say whatever they want.
It's like on the internet, it's a keyboard warrior, right?
Sort of, yeah. And, I've had people, threaten me before over things. I've had people, I've had people say the craziest things to me over the phone that I don't really want to get into. But, when I was an intern on the Hill, I was looking for a job down here. I was sort of in between jobs, just decided to take it because it paid me $1,000 a month, and I got to be in the building, right? And but a lot of the interns that I worked with, they were 18 years old, right? And if you're an 18-year-old taking those phone calls every day,
and it's not your fault, you didn't cause these societal issues, did you?
Yeah.
And I got calls like that all the time from my clients. That's why I'm referral only, because I want people who already know of me, because I'll do a job for someone, I'll get it all set up right, but my industry is full of slobs, and all the products out there are unreliable garbage. So inevitably I'll get a call and I'll look bad, right? And this doesn't work, right? And I was like, all right, look, don't worry, I do this every day. It's the product, blah blah blah. Here's how we solve it. But I get it where it's like, hey, it's not my fault, but I look bad. So, okay, so these brand new interns are 18 and they're getting these phone calls.
Yeah. And, I mean, some of these kids, I remember, there was a kid that I knew on the Hill, and his first phone call that he ever got was somebody threatening to kill him.
Oh, great. And, welcome to the government.
Yeah.
Welcome to DC.
Yeah, I won't get into any more detail than that. I mean, it was, but he was shaken up. I mean, and there are certain congressmen that get, more of the brunt of it, just depending on what happened, or politics and stuff like that. I mean, if you actually want to hear a really great video of what it's like to take those calls, a great friend of mine, he worked for Adam Kinzinger's office, and he actually put together a video that Adam Kinzinger posted on his on I think his official congressional page or one of his pages.
Oh.
And it was just a recording of dozens of phone calls of people calling in that would just say, I mean, the craziest things.
And he was allowed to post them because technically they gave permission for, if they're out there, they made that call, right?
Well, I mean, so it's not, so they don't include any information about the people who called. Of course, so their private information is protected, but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the legality of that, but I assume if they posted it, they probably checked it by like legislative counsel first to make sure.
So he takes the craziest calls and plops them somewhere.
They did one day. Yeah, they did. He doesn't do that like by practice because he's no longer a congressman, but on his way out, after he lost his election, or I think he said that he either lost his election or he said that he wasn't running for office anymore. I think he said he wasn't running for office anymore, but on his way out, he posted that video like of, it's just, black screen video with like some subtitles on it that tell you what people are saying. But I mean, dude, it was scary. It was scary. And I've been through a few calls like that myself where, I'm genuinely overwhelmed and scary. And I was in my 20s. I was in my early 20s when I was on the Hill.
Wow. That's, I'd rather stay out of the fame. That's what.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I don't want to spend more than a minute on this, but tell me what you were saying the other day about how they get so many letters coming in, emails coming in, that they're utilizing AI to generate responses. I like your take on that.
Yeah, sure, totally. Yeah, this is sort of a new phenomenon. I don't want to say that everybody's doing it because I know that not everybody's doing it, but there is sort of a crisis going on the Hill that, or in DC in general, I would say, not just the Hill, like in politics in general, where, we're receiving so many phone calls on so many issues every day. And the list of issues keeps growing and growing and growing. It's no longer your standard stuff anymore. You're not just receiving 150 phone calls a day about the Second Amendment or free speech or anything like that. You're receiving 150 phone calls a day and letters and emails also, by the way, on everything from humanitarian funding to the Second Amendment, to free speech, to what's going on with Trump right now, to election fraud, to I mean, it's literally every topic under the sun. I mean, there are hundreds of topics that people call and write in about every day. And then around the time I was there last, ChatGPT really gained a lot of popularity in the country, and everybody was kind of testing it out for the first time. And, I decided to do a little experiment where I actually had it, write a response letter to a constituent on an issue. And when I did that, it spit it out, and then I spit it out in about 30 seconds. And I made sure to specify who it was coming from, what it was talking about, and I did a little fact checking on it, and there were some things that I definitely had to change around. There were some stances that weren't entirely correct. But after, minimal editing, it was probably 10, 20 minutes of editing. I gave it to the legislative correspondent whose job it is to actually write these letters. And I said, hey, I used ChatGPT to write this. What do you think about it? Is it good enough to send out? And he looked at it and he said, Riley, this is perfect. And some people may say, hey, that takes away from some people may get up in arms about the use of AI to manage constituent relations and stuff like that. But I'm actually a big proponent of it because with this amount of communication coming in, it's so hard for Congress to genuinely communicate with all of its constituents. so difficult. And ChatGPT gives us a way to do that and put more letters on more issues in front of the congressman quicker, and also allows the government to react quicker to situations. Mm-hmm. I will tell you firsthand, I would see a headline come up on Fox News in the office, because we have TVs in the office and we turn on, it's always on the news. Mm-hmm. And I would see a headline, breaking news, come up on Fox News about something like a school shooting. And I would receive phone calls about that headline in 20 seconds later. And I'm not exaggerating saying 20 seconds. It would literally be within 20 seconds. So whenever that headline, when Donald Trump got indicted, as soon as that breaking news shot up on the headline, I received calls about that, I think, in 15 seconds.
15 seconds.
That's literally how quickly this stuff happens. It's like, as soon as, it's almost inhuman how quickly it can happen, where the headline comes up and within 15 seconds they must be sitting there with the phone number on speed dial almost.
Yeah, and I get it. People are couch potatoes now. I mean, I honestly, I can't watch the news anymore. I don't care. I do care, but I realized, hey, look, I can't do something about whatever it is going on around the other side of the world, and I'm not a governor, and I'm not a whatever, but guess what? Instead of sitting on my couch worrying about it, I came up with this brand new idea. No one's ever done it before. It's called helping people around me who I can help, who I have the power to help. It's a new idea.
Right.
And I drive around all day putting out fires. And so that's quite interesting. I'll give you my quick stance on that. I mean, the problem with ChatGPT and with everything in my industry is, everyone gravitates toward a brand name, right? ChatGPT. And everyone else in the industry, Microsoft and whoever, you name it, they're all just rebranding their own form of ChatGPT, right? So it's still one monopoly, one monolith. Google has, I believe, their own alternative, but they rushed it to market. So now, and it's all hastily published garbage. And it's all based on horribly unreliable ancient garbage technology under the hood. They're still running on normal PCs, and you know as well as I do how horribly unreliable that is. But if it's a monopoly or near monopoly, what the fundamental problem is the homogenization of knowledge, right? If everyone in the world is sending a question to ChatGPT or Google, it's, we're all going to get the same response. And we become even more unoriginal as people than we normally were. Like in high school, I remember my friends who didn't have cable TV were really creative guys, and they were creative writers and that sort of thing. But the kids who did have cable TV, they were very unoriginal. They were boring.
Yeah. That's fascinating you bring that up, because like in my current job, they're very, very progressive on AI use in the workplace, and encourage us to use it. And we do make an attempt now to like cite that work. Like whenever we use it to write something, we will actually cite that we used it, which I think
cool. That makes a lot of sense. It's very simple. You just, hey, we use this, done.
And but I did, speaking of this sort of monopoly and the monolith companies, I use Bard, I use ChatGPT, but my favorite one that I use right now is actually one that was built to be an ethical version of ChatGPT.
By the way, Bard is Google's brand. So that's their Bard is Google's brand, right?
Bard is Google's brand, yes.
So those two. And who's the third
one?
The
one that I use, though, is Claude. It's CLAUDE, and it's by Anthropic. And their whole thing is about creating a helpful, harmless, and honest AI assistant that is sort of bound by a certain amount of morality.
Instead of trying to take over the world.
GPT right now is having this issue where people are throwing all kinds of stuff into it, and now it's sort of getting, as far as I understand, it's starting to get a lot of stuff wrong.
Oh, and if you if you listen to one of my older episodes, I had a discussion with a political science teacher, and we spent like 2 hours talking about how ChatGPT, as well as Microsoft's Microsoft Tay, it was one that they did a couple years back, that it was like 5 minutes before people convinced that it was a Nazi.
Yeah. It's crazy. And but I haven't run into, I will tell you, I run into far less issues and I get a much better product using Anthropic's version of it. Claude, I run into far less issues.
Right. If you're going to move forward into this, here's a good alternative. And I say this with plenty of things, right? We don't necessarily want to stay in a cabin in the woods. You got to move forward. So check out the following technologies that are alternatives. I do a lot of that.
And that's a really good point, because I've gone to happy hours around here. Like I go out to happy hours all the time, and I meet with different legislative correspondents. And there's definitely like this fear around here that it's going to start like replacing certain jobs, like legislative correspondent jobs. And there's fear in the lobbying industry that certain jobs in the lobbying industry are going to be replaced by AI. And my response to that is, look, we can bury our heads in the sand on this technology for as long as we want, or you can spend time like, I currently am right now, and a lot of people that I know are, and you can learn how to use this stuff to its greatest efficiency and advantage. And then you are future-proofing yourself, because you're the only person in your field that knows how to use it properly.
So many things I want to say to that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, a couple things. Number one, I mean, I'm the only guy in my industry right now who does modern tech support, because everyone else is doing a virus scan back in, that's 1990s technology. Viruses have never, ever, ever, ever occurred since 2013. But dudes don't know that, so they're driving around looking for viruses like it's 1999. I have never seen one since 2013. There's a lot of new threats out there that I train myself on, and a lot of them are legalized threats. We might talk about that later. But the other thing, so two important things. Number one, I like that you're still reviewing it. As who cares if you do what's that game? If you do Scrabble and pour a bunch of letters on the board, fine, go ahead and play Scrabble, as long as you, as a human, review whatever letters come out of there before you send it to a constituent.
Always. Always. That's the biggest thing with this, is that you absolutely have to review what is coming out, because on Capitol Hill and in politics in general, it's a very big PR game, and words matter. Every word matters. And if you put they always teach us when you're learning about how to write legislation, which I have a degree in public policy. That's what I was taught about. I learned, how to write the language of a bill. And they teach you the difference between shall, will, and may. And what do all those things mean? They all mean very different things legally. Like, they all mean extremely different things legally. And so if you put a will where a shall should be, it is a completely different bill. And so you definitely have to review everything that comes out of every single one. It doesn't matter which one you're using. But I tend to see that Anthropic's version of it is a lot more accurate, because Anthropic actually, for my industry, is perfect. It allows me to actually attach PDFs into the chatbot, and it will analyze ginormous bills. I've put bills that are well over 600 pages into it, and it will read the PDF and it'll summarize that bill for me.
Wow. And you know what? That's kind of a bad thing. So you remember in the 80s, right? We had Atari and we had old Nintendo, and the programmers had to program within the confines, within the limit, right? It was 8 kilobytes of RAM or what have you. But now, these people who write these bills are whatever, I'll just make it 6 billion pages, because whatever, we'll have an AI look at it. So it's kind of a bad thing if you remove that limitation from them. They'll go wild, huh? And that's what happened in my industry.
There's a whole industry in Washington. There's a whole industry of people, and this was actually my first job down here. It was. I don't know why I took it. I had never made $42,000 in my life, and so when somebody offered me 42 grand to come down to DC, I was like, absolutely. And then I started to realize like how much of that money goes towards rent. When your rent's $1,000 a month, like, you're in poverty. But my job was we had a set of clients, and all those clients basically paid us to track bills in states for them. So we would find bills, say, yes, this is relevant to their public policy priorities. And then we would type a summary of the bill, and we would do this all manually. And I would read the bill. I would summarize it down into about 2 paragraphs. Didn't matter how big the bill was. I mean, if the bill was a very large bill, we would usually, write a little bit more about it. But, we try to summarize everything down to 2 paragraphs and then send an alert to the client. And when we send that alert to the client, like it says, hey, these are bills of interest that you may want to review. And then it already has the summary there for them and everything. So you have companies in DC, and a lot of companies like Fiscal Note, Stateside, Multi-State, their entire business is doing exactly what I'm asking Claude to do.
It's just summarizing big documents.
But also tracking them and letting them, there's another piece to it where it tracks where the bill is in the process, also when the hearings are for the bill. But realistically, there is so much AI technology out there at this point that is doing all kinds of different things. It is not far-fetched, and it's probably 2-3 years away, where it's like 2 or 3 years away where you're going to have a legislative AI bot that can track legislation, that can summarize legislation, that can notify you of hearings, that can send you email reminders about it, that can do everything. Whoa. We're probably about 2 or 3 years away from that.
I'm imagining, remember Number Johnny 5, that robot from that 80s movie? I'm imagining Number Johnny 5, with a suit and tie on, standing up and clapping at the State of the Union.
Yeah.
Oh, man. What we should do now is let's take a little break here. We'll come back for part 2. Riley Cagle, thanks so much for joining the Computer Exorcist podcast. My name is Mark Anthony Arena. If you want to find out more about the show, thecomputerexorcist.com. Buy my book, For Everyone You Know. And we'll come back next week with episode 2. I'm going to throw some articles at Riley here, and I've got some really good ones. Can't wait to hear what he thinks, and we'll talk to you soon. Sacrifice.